This is Dracula by Bram Stoker, retold by Chris Rice at the pre-intermediate level, Chapter 8. To Save a Soul. Later the same day, Arthur Holmwood and his best friend Quincy Morris visited Van Helsing at the hospital. Of course, Arthur was angry with Van Helsing. He was very unhappy about Lucy's death. The idea of cutting her head off made him sick. He refused to listen at first, but Quincy said, "Perhaps we should listen, Art. I loved Lucy too, remember? I'm as sad as you are, and the professor tried very hard to save her life." So Holmwood listened as the professor patiently explained things to him. "This is the worst thing that I have ever asked another man to do," Van Helsing said. "When Miss Lucy was alive, I was her friend, not just a doctor. I gave her my nights and my days. In my way, I loved her too. I will do anything to save her soul. This is the only way to do it. So that is why I must ask you to change your mind." Finally, Arthur stood up, took Van Helsing's hand and said, "It's hard, very hard. I can't really understand, but I'll go with you and wait." Sometime after midnight, the four men, Van Helsing, Dr. Seward, Holmwood, and Quincy Morris, stood in the Westenra family tomb. Van Helsing opened the top of Lucy's coffin and told Holmwood and Morris to look inside. There was a long silence. Then Arthur said in a low voice, "Professor, I know that you are not playing a joke on me. You are too honest and serious for that. But somebody has stolen the body. This is a matter for the police." Van Helsing walked away without reply. When everybody was outside, he locked the door to the tomb. He took a white cloth from a bag that he had with him. Inside the cloth, there was some bread. He took the bread, broke it into pieces, and pressed it into the space between the door and the stone wall of the tomb. He pressed more bread into the keyhole. "This is holy bread," he explained. "I am closing the tomb, and now nothing evil can get in." "What happens now?" Arthur asked. He was still unhappy about the disappearance of Lucy's body. "Now," said Van Helsing, "prepare yourselves. You will need to be very brave. Let us wait behind this tree. We can watch the tomb from there." Nobody spoke. A soft wind blew through the trees, then died away. It left a deep, dreamlike silence. An hour passed, and then they saw something move. A white shape was passing through the trees. The shape stepped out of the shadows into the moonlight, and everybody saw clearly. A golden-haired woman, dressed in a white cloth, was moving towards the tomb. She was holding a small child in her arms. It was Lucy, but a different Lucy. Her mouth was wet with the fresh blood of the child. It ran down her face. It colored the white cloth that she was wearing. Van Helsing stepped out. The woman stopped and, with an angry look, threw the child to the ground. Then she noticed Arthur and moved towards him. Arthur moved back and hid his face in his hands, but she continued to walk towards him. Her face changed. She reached out her hand and said, in a sweet and lovely voice, "Come to me, Arthur. Leave these others and come with me. My arms are hungry for you." Arthur took his hands away from his face and looked at her. He could not move. Her words of love danced in his head. She was beautiful. She was his Lucy. Van Helsing was ready for this. Before Lucy could touch Arthur with her vampire's teeth, he jumped between them, a small gold cross in his hand. With a wild cry and the look of a hungry animal in her eyes, Lucy jumped back, then ran to the door of the tomb. But there again she stopped. She could not get in past the holy bread. Finally, she ran into the shadow of a tree. The four men could see the white of her teeth shining in the darkness. There was silence. At last, Van Helsing, still holding up the cross, turned to Arthur. He asked, "Now do I have your permission?" Arthur went down on his knees and hid his face in his hands. "Do what you have to," he said, and his voice was shaking. "I've seen the worst already. Nothing can be as bad as that." As Dr. Seward and Quincy ran to Arthur's side, the professor walked back to the door of the tomb. He pulled out some of the bread. Immediately, Lucy moved from the shadows and disappeared like smoke through the narrow space between the door and the wall of her tomb. Van Helsing then put the bread back. "My friends," he said, "we can do nothing more before daylight. She cannot come out. She is tired and she has not eaten for 2 nights. She will soon sleep, and then we will do our work." As the sky grew light, Van Helsing unlocked the door to the tomb again. Lucy was asleep inside her coffin. She was more beautiful than ever. Arthur was much paler than she was, but he cried openly as he looked at her. Van Helsing did not have the same feelings. He could not see Lucy Westerna in the coffin. He could only see a vampire with the dried blood of a child around its mouth. He opened his bag and took out some doctor's knives and a thick, long, pointed piece of wood. "Vampires cannot die of old age," he said. "They continue to live. They drink blood and turn other people into vampires. She has already attacked those little children, but they will not suffer. But people often give their blood and then learn to love the vampire. They will become vampires after they die. There was a very great danger of that for you, my friend Arthur. But there is a way to save their souls. We can save them from a life of evil and an afterlife of endless punishment." He pointed to the long, sharp piece of wood. "It is a wonderful thing to save a soul. I can do it, but—" He looked again at Arthur. "But you should do it because you loved her best." "Oh, my true friend," said Arthur, "tell me what to do. I shan't fail." "Brave man," said Van Helsing, "take this piece of wood in one hand and place the point over her heart. I shall read some words from this holy book, and then you must push the wood straight through the vampire's heart." Still pale, but with a strong hand, Arthur took the piece of wood and a heavy stone. Quincy Morris stood by his side. Van Helsing began to read, while Dr. Seward placed the point exactly over the heart. Van Helsing finished reading. Arthur hit the wood with the stone as hard as he could. The body in the coffin jumped, and the vampire's mouth produced a terrible scream. Its body turned this way and that way, and its sharp teeth opened and shut. Its mouth was soon red with its own blood, but Arthur didn't stop. He hit the wood again and again, deeper and deeper into the vampire's heart. At last, it stopped fighting. There was no movement now. Before you leave this tomb, Van Helsing said to Arthur, look for the last time at Lucy's face. She is not a vampire now. You have saved her soul. Arthur went down on his knees and kissed Lucy for the last time. Then he and Quincy walked, arm in arm, out into the sunlight. Dr. Seward and Van Helsing stayed in the tomb. They had to do one last job. They filled Lucy's mouth with garlic and cut off her head. Then they shut the coffin for the last time. Outside, the professor gave the key of the tomb to Arthur. We have finished the first part of our work, Van Helsing said. Now we must find and destroy the center of this evil. I want to know, are you ready to follow me into even greater danger? One after the other, the three men shook Van Helsing's hand. They knew that he had to finish his terrible work. They promised to help him.